Okay, thanks all for coming today. Can I just remind you before we start to turn off your phones so we don't have to interrupt the lecture? Thank you. I'd like to, following us earlier speculations in previous lectures on the nature of the material and political, I'd like to welcome Dr. Esther Leslie, who is Professor of Political Aesthetics at Birkbeck, just next door. And she's a writer. She has written about animation and chemistry and colour in both a kind of in a very broad spectrum, and is one of the editors of Radical Philosophy. So thanks very much for talking today.
Thank you. Okay, so maybe a slightly strange paper, I hope not, but it's about liquid crystals and screens. And my interest today is in the screen, the liquid crystal display screen, and maybe its associated technologies too in passing, plasma screens or LED. I'm interested in the liquid crystal per se, and I've been beginning to trace its various histories. Its first tentative discovery in the 1880s, and then a proper sort of scientific investigation and announcement of it as the fourth state of matter in the 1920s, and then subsequent applications in technology and science. But what really interests me is its aesthetic, if there is such a thing as a liquid crystal aesthetic. So something of that's going to come out in what I'm going to say, but I've not yet been able to fully immerse myself in liquid crystal history. So what I'll say today concentrates more on issues to do with the liquid crystal display screen, and what the liquid crystal makes of the screen and what the screen makes of us, coming to the scientific realization, of course, that we are also liquid crystal in large part. This isn't just about the present, although it also is. I'm captivated by a site that I've yet to decode, symbolised maybe by this picture or this one. Walking into the British Library or a cafe, a university, you often see writers sat in ranks, gazing into a screen, and it's differently coloured, but sometimes greeny blue illuminations lighting up their face, particularly noticeable in these more shadowy realms that we inhabit these days, certainly after the sort of new ecological consciousness and the new light bulb edicts and so on. So each human, for his or herself, a glaucous aquatic gleam, returning us perhaps to the phosphorescent oceans from which we once came. The shadows, I hear, will be chased out again soon, though, and so will the gleam. Apparently, such a sight of reflected screen glow may no longer be with us in a few years, or will be more seldomly seen as electronic ink devices develop and need no backlight, as with the Kindle and so on, and they will become increasingly integrated into monitors which display static content. I'm fascinated by the claims for the new screens and the question of whether these are just old claims reworded or truly new promises in the encounter of viewer and screen. Here's an advertisement from 2010 in relation to the newest of screens, the 3D ones. Ultimate reality with Samsung 3D. There's only one way to experience 3D when you're not in a theatre, and that's the Samsung 3D LED TV. It offers the ultimate immersive viewing experience by liberating content from the flat confines of the TV and turning it into explosive imagery. The effect is breathtaking, life-enriching, ultra-real picture quality that rivals the cinema, imported into your own living room. Samsung innovation has even made it possible to convert your favourite 2D movies to 3D, because the Samsung 3D LED TV demands your attention, no matter what's on. This 3D is an effect of the machine. It's an experience of the machine, be it in the movie theatre or in the home. Now, this is not to be confused with the three-dimensionality of real existence. This 3D reality is set against the old mechanism of TV too, which becomes flat with its flat confines. TV is conceived as providing an image without depth and bounded by edges. The 3D screen, by contrast, is explosive. It juts out, or its contents jut out at the viewer. It violently intrudes on the viewer's space. Explosive imagery, presumably, is evoking an image of action movies. Our breath is taken away. It kills us, so to speak. It consumes us, for sure, as whatever concoction is twinkling across the screen and out of it, our whole attention will be demanded. There's nothing but the screen. It's all, and we are nothing. I want to concentrate today on the character of the reality mediated on the screen, or more specifically, the way in which nature is framed. And I want to investigate modes of representation in which efforts have been made, laborious efforts in the main, to imitate nature, to adopt its light, shade, and movement, and its time even, in an ever more ambitious mimesis. Through history, this mimesis is asserted through different forms, different materials, whose examination provides evidence, I'll say, of social and ideological process, as it also provides evidence of the eternal return of an ever same in the guise of the new. In his Arcades project, Walter Benjamin considers the question of realism in painting, evoking the Belgian painter Antoine Wirtz, on the impossibility of perfection in art. Wirtz writes, "The most difficult problem was perfect relief, deep perspective carried to the most complete illusion. And there was, notes Wirtz, a technical fix to this. The stereoscope resolved it." On this, Benjamin comments that it shows very clearly that the theory of progress in the arts is bound up with the idea of the imitation of nature and must be discussed in the context of this idea. So imitation of nature in art then means adopting its perspectives, its depth, even as the mechanism that showcases this, the canvas, is flat as it's ever been, certainly since trading relations in 17th century Holland encouraged the artist's provision of portable, transportable screens as mobile and equivalent as any other commodity in order to decorate the walls of domestic interiors. So paintings, the first flat-pack commodity, designed to hang one-dimensionally on walls, its paradoxical task to illusion depth. And this won't be my first evocation of an anachronism. To imitate nature means further to produce the illusion of presence, of something that exceeds the flatness of the screen, does not just reach back into the depths of the image's perspective, but leaps out such that it, says Wirtz, would seem within reach of your hand. And he praises on these grounds the trompe-l'oeil and the style of the panorama as pure realism. Painting becomes panorama, striving to present a perfectly depth-filled illusion of nature. To this is added technical resources, as in the diorama with its light effects and combination of three-dimensional and painted objects. Karl Hagenbeck's Arctic scenery at his Hamburg Zoo in 1907, his Eismeer, or Sea of Ice, even included moving parts, amidst which the Arctic animals picked their way. Through this drive to imitation in various optical entertainments, from paintings to zoos, painting gets entangled in a drive towards mimesis that comes to compromise its painterliness. For the qualities that most convincingly illusion the real become ever more a property of the non-painted. For example, time, light, movement, are the technical feats of technologies that in some way or another reproduce the real, but they reproduce it on screens and not canvases. Time, light, and movement might try to insinuate themselves into painting, but it comes to be seen only as an effort, a gesture, an effort to emulate that which is achieved effortlessly by other means. Only colour remains for a while, a trump card, until painting no longer resembles, but rather reassembles in various modes of abstraction. Painting is knocked out by these other modes. Walter Benjamin reflects on the relationship of newer optical modes to time, light, and movement, and in particular on the compression of time's passing in the diorama. Here is something like a sportive precursor of fast motion cinematography, a witty and somewhat malicious dancing acceleration of time, which by way of contrast makes me think of the hopelessness of a mimesis as Breton evokes it in Nadia. The painter who in late afternoon sets up his easel before the Vieux Port in Marseille, and in the waning light of day constantly alters the light relations in his picture until it shows only darkness. The end of painting, visioned here, as it had already been before Breton by Malevich in 1915, in a solidly black canvas, a zero of painting. Time and light obliterates painting into nothingness until the white becomes blackened, the canvas becomes screen. And if something like painting was to stagger on, it had to become apparently just a concoction of base elements, of colour and of line, disassociated from nature, its time, its perspectives. Malevich rescinded painting not only into blackness but also into whiteness too, in a series of white-on-white paintings from 1917 to 18. This move was commented on by Laszlo Moholy-Nagy in the late 1920s. He imagined the white square on a square white canvas by Malevich as painting's end and film's new dawn. Not Malevich's transcendent floating infinity as such, but rather the projection of whiteness onto whiteness, of light onto a lightened surface, a screen. Broadcasting the arrival of the new kino culture of colour and light, Moholy-Nagy flagged up the crisis of art brought on by technological change. Symptoms of the commencing decline of traditional painting. I'm not referring to the terrible economic plight of the artists at the present time, are already apparent in a number of directions. The development of the suprematist Malevich may serve as an example. His last picture, a white square on a square white canvas, is clearly symbolic of the film screen, symbolic of the transition from painting in terms of pigment to painting in terms of light. The white surface can serve as a reflector for the direct projection of light and, what is more, of light in motion. Moholy-Nagy's enthusiasm for the white-on-white square converted Malevich's negation into a plus, rescinding the quest for artistic autonomy by positing the painter's canvas as a surface for something else, or as a surface, a screen. Now, the process of obliteration of painting through new media, through their instagements of time, movement, and light, has taken on myriad forms since, and I want to rest in the present for a while, with a work in which the theme appears as allegory, perhaps. A work by John Gerard, whose animated paintings, or animated sculptures, rigidly adhere to the passage of time. This one's called Oil Stick Work. It presents the fluidity of time's passing in an act of computerized mimesis. It also renders oil painting's sublation by its reference to the older art medium of oil, here as the oil stick, which is then annexed to the contemporary resonance of oil, that black gold that powers an assault on nature. A virtual human being, a computer avatar, Mexican-American painter Angelo Martinez, blacks out with an artist's crayon a large barn. Inside the barn, animal feed for factory-grown pigs is processed and stored. These are called grow finish units, as is the series of works from which this is one example. These grow finish units are full of pigs automatically fed till slaughter in the former Dust Bowl areas of the Great Western Plains, subject to various other works by Gerard. And in fact, I mean, these are the other works which showed the grow finish units themselves. Oil stick work is a barn where their feed is processed. Martinez is tiny, the barn is big. If we watched long enough, we can watch him arrive at dawn, 7 days a week, and work a full day as night falls, in line with Kansas time. Martinez is a good automatic worker, but his job is a senseless one. One tiny bit of wall is blackened in the course of a day. The work, as artwork and as act of labour, will last for 30 years, with Martinez getting up each day, rain and shine, winter and summer, to carry out his task. In 2038, the barn will be black all over, and the work will end. Gerard hopes that by the time the work has culminated, has lived out its life, so to speak, so too will US oil, and the dependency on it must disappear. So from an aesthetic of oil sublated technically by pixels to an economy of oil sublated naturally by depletion. Gerard's works use the video game technology real-time 3D. He photographs the chosen site from every angle in a complete circling of the site. It's a contemporary panorama. A team of specialists helped to subsequently build up the computer, to build up in the computer a 360-degree radial image of the site. The photographic stills are turned into continuous animated cinematic panning shots. The image is worked over by 3D modelling, guided by topographical and satellite data. The computer power needed to generate the image takes a long time to process the data. The image is composited into existence, from stillness to movement, over many months. But the process is made more complex because time is encoded into the image. The pannings that appear in the final piece are each annexed to a real portion of time. 24 hours of the day cycle by, 365 days of the year pass in real time. The still images are made to dance to the rhythm, lights, and shades of the real world. In the grow finish units, we see nothing of what happens inside the factory. The thousands of pigs fed by corn grown from nitrogen made of oil and gas, which arrives with them through automatic feeders. In the animation, every few months a truck arrives at each building and waits for 1 hour, as invisibly the pigs are removed and new ones added. The process is barely visible in reality, neither is it here. There's no human instance in a scene that's devised and controlled and exploited entirely by humans. Other than the appearance of the truck, there's little movement in the images. The lake of effluent piped out from the pig's stalls shimmers as a virtual wind blows it, and it reflects the changing sky. This is an animated behaviour produced by code, not an intervention of nature, but a simulation. In these complex images, animated sculptures or hybrids of document and fantasy, of virtuality and reality, there's a surrogate for the real world. It seems to have its light and shade, it seems to have its time, it seems even to have its impenetrable modes of production. All is shown mimetically and from every angle as the scene is arced continually for the viewer. Not that this means we have before us any image of social relations, any panoramic understanding of what makes this tick. Bertolt Brecht talked of reality slipping into the functional in the photograph of a factory. By this he means that the real takes place in functions that are imperceptible to those who do not carry them out, or even to those that do, for he's also indicating that secret that masks itself in animated over-liveliness, the secret of commodity fetishism, the real illusion that is most identified with capitalist commodity-producing society. The truth of who has agency, who has productive capacity, creativity and value is concealed in a mechanism of fetishism. Brecht says it's concealed in the mechanism of fetishism that is photography, with all its documentary rhetoric. It might now too be concealed in a flat screen broadcasting a seeming document within a real world a 3D world. If painting was overcome by cinematography, is it not here, actually, just reworked too, remodelled technically, such that the technical permeation of the material reinforces in the end a distinctly human control which turns the moving image back into painting, a certain kind of realist, if romantic too, landscape painting. A successful Hollywood filmmaker, for one, Michael Mann, enthusiast of the new HD cameras, has observed that what he does now is digital painting. Afforded by the camera is complete control over every element of recording nature as one pursues its perfected recreation. The camera's numerous variables, its gamma levels and colour timing, are aspects of its mechanism and not features of post-production. The camera becomes a palette that paints out the world. Incidentally, I heard someone describing being on set at the latest Martin Scorsese film, a 3D film called Hugo Cabret. To be on set now apparently means to watch things via one of the many LCD screens that are dotted around on which the filmic production actually takes place. High-definition screens, these are the media of today. How might a contemporary image on a contemporary machine expose what Benjamin calls, and called of film and photography, a historical construction of consciousness? A mediated vision of nature that's historical, that is to say, is of us and our time. It's not technology itself that gives rise to these questions, not as such, as a construction such as Benjamin's Goethean Urform indicates. All our machines are prefigured in the first machine, and even within this image produced by a mechanism called oil painting, Caspar David Friedrich's painting from 1823 to 4, Sea of Ice, Ice Mare, better. An image of, not in, liquid and crystal. Something of the future is already coiled up, and we can perceive in its then elements of an image to come now, a kitsch sublime display image on an LCD flat screen. Or a scene or a frame from a digitally post-processed eco-disaster movie. The technical means does, however, contribute to the differentness of the nature that is evoked through its visioning. As liquid crystal, an amalgam, in a state that defies the usual separated categories of solid and liquid, the liquid crystal has found application in today's screens. Liquid crystal displays and plasma screens, machineries of much contemporary viewing, in conjunction with Blu-ray or DVD players, produce their images through electrical charges that switch pixels, dots of liquid crystal, on and off. If the photograph is a moment snatched out of time and the film a stringing together of stilled moments of flowing time, then the LCD and the plasma screens of today embed time and negate it more convolutedly in the mechanism, for each picture element has time embedded in it, making for a viewing surface of extraordinary flexibility. The permanently scanned image with a high-frequency backlight is flicker-free. It can be frozen at any moment and held still like a photograph. It can flow, barely leaving traces. The machinery is so adept at freezing and unfreezing, at the crystalline and the liquid, that these elements have become part of its repertoire of themes, as the rash of eco-disaster movies about global warming, the big freeze, and the great floods attests. The Day After Tomorrow presents scenes of a New York immobilized under snow and ice after a superstorm causes rapid worldwide climate change. It's a spectacle of absolute devastation that concentrates filmmakers' efforts and captures audiences' imaginations. The pleasure of the films lies in their rendering of the drama of natural catastrophe. The film scenarios are dependent on technological wizardry, making these depictions of nature's revenge celluloid versions of Adorno's thesis of a dialectic of enlightenment in which there's a forceful return of the mythical in the form of nature, angered, via an inadequately integrated technical. The scenarios depict nature crushing technology and its masters, the humans, through a technically rendered spectacle that aims to be magically imperceptible. The logical destination of photorealistic modelling is to prove itself, which is to say to make its fictions invisible in the photoreal context of live action. The divide between humans and nature is reinforced thematically and made possible through an unconscious technics envisaged in the dramatic and hyper-real rendering of a cruel nature crushing human endeavour. Liquid crystal became the matter of the screen and on the screen in modern eco-disaster movies made by CGI, floods, ice-ups, the seas and the mountains. Where the liquid and the crystal were the thematic matter of the artistic and painterly sublime, of mountain ranges and raging oceans, now liquid crystals become the technical matter of a new faux sublime, agents of our aestheticized pleasure at the spectacle of our own annihilation. The screens of high technology have conjured up high nature to sell themselves. Sublime visions of canyons and mountains, exotic flowers, birds in swooping flight and seascape, or the rapid movements of skiers. This nature sublime cried out for the machinery's remarkable vividness in modelling 3D, its deftness at displaying supersaturated colours, the ability to display smooth and dramatic movement, and the inviting capacity to immobilise the image, as the preset picture freeze function suggests. Animation, as a now dominant screen medium, has always been about stopping and starting, stillness impelled into life. This is what the stop frame technique achieves. It's what the cell system makes possible. But now the screens themselves seem to collaborate in this liquidity and crystallization. Is this why animation is now so pervasive in art, in Hollywood, everywhere? Because the screens invite it. What is the question of animation? How does something immobile and partial transform into the complexity and chaos of physical phenomena, something that moves in a more or less plausible world? This it does now, when it does it digitally, through its techniques of layering, compositing, texture mapping, pixel tweaking, and rendering. The layers of the CG image, the processing, the pixelization, could all be seen as a kind of crystallization or petrifaction of the image. Endowing movement to this is the inputting of unrest that would be life. What of time? In the liquid crystal display screen, it's not frames per second that count, but rather the time it takes to make the transition from darkness to brightness to darkness in the image. This speed, measured in milliseconds, is not consciously perceivable by the human eye until the mechanism begins to fail. I wonder, though, if it's a dim knowledge of this, which is effectively a diurnal sort of passing from night to day to night, is what has made it so tempting for artists to turn recently to LCD diurnalism, as in John Gerard, or in the Korean artist Lili Nam. I was walking along Tottenham Court Road and glanced into one of those audio hi-fi stores that flanked the way. And in the window was one of the latest thin-as-paper Samsung screens, an LED backlit LCD screen. The reason it grabbed my attention was because on it appeared to be a display of an impressionist painting, framed by the deep gloss black of the TV edging. But then the sunset on the painting started to twinkle in the Monet-like image, and then Chinese-style painting appeared, and likewise the willow trails shuddered and shook in the wind, and then all the seasons began to pass, through summer, autumn, until the picture on the screen was covered up by snow. And then I found out that Samsung is a sponsor of the work of a media artist called Lili Nam, whose contribution to art history is the animation of previously static traditional painting from East and West. A Korean newspaper report puts it thus: Samsung Electronics Company recently made a pledge to provide Lee with 90 LED TVs every year for the next 5 years. During the period, some of his work will be loaded in Samsung TVs for sale so that consumers can enjoy his works at home. In another of Lili Nam's media paintings, canvases by Cézanne and Jeon-Jae Jeonson are spattered by digital raindrops as they hang side by side on the screen. Jeonson's painting of Nam Sam takes on Cézanne's colours and forms in his painting of Sainte Victoire. Cézanne's painting fades out. Eventually, each ends up identical to the other and is then obliterated by snow, out of which their original forms re-emerge. There's another one, it's this one, which sets Monet next to the Korean painter Sochi Heroyeon. Apologies for mispronunciations. The ferryman in Monet's painting floats across the bars of the frame into the painting by Sochi. The frame is exceeded. In fact, the frame becomes something more like the black bar between frames in old-style film, a point of crossing, a route to movement or transition. The small island in Sochi's painting moves the other way. As the painting is traversed, as space is traversed and time, in the grand scale, obliterated, micro-time is set in motion. Day turns into night, and both images grow dark, and the city appears in the background out of nowhere. Morning comes again, and Sochi's painting now has a ferryman, and Monet's has an island, east into west. Other themes include past into present, and night into day often. Time, past, present, night, day, and space, east, west, country, city, are mobilized in various ways as theme of, or principle of, or reason for this animation of previously static art. The art of East and West, past and present, can be remastered, reanimated, and exceeded through the screen. An image of Mona Lisa is enlivened with parachutes, bombs, and battlefields. Even détournement can be taken up into the screen of art as technical delight. This is another one, Song of Nature, a 4-minute video installation. It's quite hard to get any decent images, so I apologize. The perfect system for this will to blend and homogenize and transmute, to introduce mobility and conjure up the moment when stasis or arrest or the setting off of the loop again should return, is apparently the liquid crystal display screen. Its name indicates its liquid fluid movement, its movement through space and the flow of time from day to night, which is also a change in illumination, the very medium of the screen of cinema. Movement, this is its gift to old static art, and the crystalline freezing of the awesome image, the interruption of time, the resolution of the image into precisely rendered sight, allows art's majesty to be enjoyed. All this takes animation back to arguably its earliest forms, making today's screens the sites of updated versions of such optical delights as the panoramas or the diurnal megalethoscopes, which were forms of magic lantern, which were their most compulsive in the 19th century, and where you'd get these cyclings from light to dark to light again. So there's a continuity in these forms. Optical entertainments recur. Just as there's fracture, breaks, stops and restarts, things newly invented, worlds never before seen, until these screens came, until these programs were invented. I've talked about all of this as animation, and I think it is all animation. And animation I've suggested, has always been some way of working through this amalgam of the liquid and the crystal, of the petrified and the still, of that which is cajoled from stillness into restlessness or movement. To this extent, the new screens continue that movement, even if they more deeply embed it as a technical logic of the machinery that conveys it. Unrest is the inputting of life. Life come about technically, life as a product of electricity. This we've known anyway since those 18th century experiments of Luigi Galvani, who sent electrical impulses through the legs of a dead frog, and they twitched as if it were alive. Galvani had found biological, animal electricity, and from this opened up nature in dissection. He found something within it, and he found a technique of imitation which revealed something about the actuality of life. Arguably, all animation is just such a shudder, a jerking, generated, it should be stressed, by the inputting of electricity in order to imitate life. Animations moved from Galvani's twitching frog legs to megalethoscopes, to cinema screens, to LCD or plasma, here the inventor of the plasma screen, Larry Weber, to possibly somewhere else today that renders the screen redundant, and this is what I want to just finish on. If technologies of seeing, in combination with these new optical entertainments, used, in a sense, the elements of the body, the jerkiness of seeing, for example, our saccadic visual mode, combined with notions around the persistence of vision and so on. If those technologies use that to render continuous strips of images out of moments of arrest, what technologies of seeing meet what facilities of bodies now in the liquid crystal epoch? This is what I want to research in future, but have only an inkling of my interest. I know that I also want to think about screens entering the body, the screen not broadcasting images of nature, but grafted onto nature, on and in us. One way I've begun to do this is through new technologies that involve fluorescent mapping of genes, for example. And in a sense, I would make an argument that that is a kind of internalization of animation. But to bring up my liquid crystals again, an example. In January 1968, Life magazine showcased how liquid crystals might screen the body. A full-length photograph of a woman's bare back daubed in black paint and liquid crystals was shown. Her skin became a dramatic swirl of blue, green, brown and black according to her body heat that correlated with changes in blood flow. Through this kaleidoscope, the body could be read for disease. Not just on the body, but in the body, the article proclaimed. Biologists, they say in this article, have found that the body contains some substances that act like liquid crystals. This discovery may in time help explain how we see and touch and think. Subsequent research has substantiated this insight from 1968, and more recently there's been the discovery that cell membranes are liquid crystalline in nature, that DNA has elements of liquid crystal within it, that effectively we are liquid crystal. We've seen flat canvases and flat screens. We've seen depth on that flatness, illusions of the world, the drive to mimetic reproduction of nature. We've seen the technical victory of realism in the form of light, time and movement, properties that once emerged as recorded documentary elements and now come as coded behaviour. I want to finish with a concept I've used a couple of times in passing, and which for me is a way of trying to point up a social and political reading of this technological chemical state of affairs. In these flattenings, these turnings of all to screen, in these internalizations of technologies. We end up dancing on the spot, finding new places of animation, animated activity, busyness that meets the needs of our eyes and the needs of our brains. Petrified unrest is my phrase. It's the phrase Benjamin uses to describe the melancholy cosmology of a jaded, revolutionary vanguardist, Blanqui. And it's the phrase he uses to describe the life history of the progenitor of the avant-garde, Charles Baudelaire. For Blanqui, petrified unrest is his sense of the state of the cosmos, a place of frenetic activity in which nothing ever occurs, an eternal stop-starting, an eternal return of the ever-same. For Benjamin, he reads this as an allegory of commodity production. Petrified unrest, he says, is also Baudelaire's rhythm. He whose deepest urge was to interrupt the course of the world, to stop it all, while also acting frenetically, sometimes for acting's sake alone. For Benjamin, petrified unrest characterizes the repetitions that Baudelaire engaged in, ever again going to market to sell his poems, ever again falling back, ever again gambling, ever again living but frozen into space, place, as he said of himself, like the stars, and knowing no development. Again, for Benjamin, an allegory for the doomed and damning forces of capitalism. Is the restless liquid, the frozen crystal of the screen, an allegory of the same developmental non-development, the same turning on the spot, the same melancholy of endless processing without change that Baudelaire and Blanqui revealed hopelessly in the 19th century, and that Benjamin thought true of his own time at least, but in an intensified way? And what of ours? That's probably quite enigmatic, but that's the sort of broader theoretical frame into which I want to continue thinking about the liquid and the crystal. So I'll stop there. So thank you for your patience. I don't know. I mean, I suppose I have this... there is a kind of melancholy in what I'm saying, I suppose, or at least at the point when it gets turned into representations that would assert that they are providing us with an unmediated access to nature, but actually all we're seeing is a technological interface, or we're seeing the screen, but not seeing the screen as a screen, but being sort of captivated on its surface for all its protestations that it's exposing something about the depths of things. I suppose I do find that melancholy. I mean, I don't know about the liquid crystals on the body. I find interesting because it's one of those abandoned technologies, you know, and then suddenly someone else said, no, let's put them in TVs. And you know, that was where it went, and nobody went any further with this excitement about painting the body. So I suppose, you know, I find something interesting there in that it sort of mirrors body painting of the epoch and all sorts of, those sort of references would look at it less as a kind of technological mode of exposure and more just an aesthetic act like Yves Klein's models rolling in paint or something. But I suppose I'd say that the sort of melancholy around this in a wider sense, because both of the artists I looked at predominantly here leave me cold, and I really, really do not like them, and I want to understand what it is that I dislike about what they're doing, and whether that has something to do simply with the mechanism through which it's conveyed, which is working back then on their sense of how we appropriate nature, and then consequently our sense of how we relate to nature. I don't know if that gets anywhere near addressing things.
I'm quite interested in this idea of this immaterial space of the screen. And if you think about it in terms of, say, an art exhibition, I'm questioning whether or not we're embodying this kind of screening capability through our own perception. Like we go into an exhibition and you don't touch the works. I wonder how much or could you say something about maybe we are embodying these kind of screening perceptions or devices? I don't know.
But we're embodying them in
we're taking them on ourselves so that potentially we're rendering our own bodies immobile or material.
Yeah, well, I think that's... I mean, I'm interested in the way in John Gerard that's made concrete in much the same way as it's made concrete in time slice technologies, where we are literally... we're rendered immobile, which is, I suppose, the setting that one's traditionally had before art, isn't it? And it's also the sublime position, sort of fixated there in awe, but what's technically added to this is a mobilization through the machinery. So you circle the site without moving, or in time slice photography, you make that circumscribing without having to move from your seat. And so it's this weird that we're given, I suppose, a general cinematic sense of movement, but it's not one that's at all directed by us. So it's to that extent we're caught within the sort of machine's movements, which I don't know. I mean, I'm interested to hear from you about what you think about screens and galleries and working with screens and screens as a site of art, and what that does both to your relationship to that production, but then what that does to viewers, or where is the aesthetic pleasure coming from does it become the quality of the screen and its capabilities? I mean, that's the interesting thing in Li Nam. Obviously, this is showcasing a technical ability rather than an aesthetic one, arguably. Thank you.
ちっちゃいスペースだから、もしあれだったら